I stood next to a century-old dam valve, a relic that controlled the entire lake system feeding Willowbrook Resort. That resort, a sprawling empire of million-dollar vacation rentals, belonged to the same HOA board president who just 3 hours ago had bulldozed my great-grandfather's barn. They called it an emergency demolition for community safety, a blatant lie, while I was at my daughter Lily's cancer treatment. What they didn't know was that my family built this dam in 1924, and we still held the original water easement. And now, Karen Whitmore, our beloved HOA dictator, had just made the biggest mistake of her perfectly manicured life. She thought she could bully a single dad grieving his father's death. She was about to learn why you never mess with a man who has nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The smell hit me first, diesel fuel and sawdust mixed with something that just broke my heart. I pulled into my driveway with Lily slumped against the passenger window, exhausted from her chemo session. A massive yellow excavator sat where my great-grandfather's barn used to stand, just sitting there like some metal vulture, surrounded by a pile of century-old timber that had weathered every storm since 1924. The sight punched through my chest like a physical blow. My knees went weak, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. That barn wasn't just wood and nails, it was the last tangible connection to Dad, who died in that same hospital 6 months ago. Every summer of my childhood, we'd spent hours in that barn, Dad teaching me to use his tools, telling me stories about great-grandpa William, and the old days when neighbors helped neighbors build things that lasted. "Daddy, where's great-grandpa's barn?" Lily's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through me like a blade. I'd promised her we'd restore that barn together once she got better. We talked about it during every hospital visit, how we'd sand down the old wood, maybe add some solar panels, turn it into her art studio. Now, it was just splinters and memories scattered across the lawn like broken promises. I could still hear Dad's voice echoing in my head from our last conversation before the cancer took him. "That barn holds our family's history, son. Promise me you'll take care of it." I'd failed him. I'd failed our entire family legacy in the span of one afternoon. A burly guy in a hard hat jogged over, clipboard in hand, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "You, Marcus Sullivan? Sorry about the timing, man. Here's your paperwork." He shoved a manila envelope into my hands and backed away like I might explode. Smart man, I was pretty close to it. The envelope felt heavy, official, the kind of weight that changes everything. I tore it open right there in the driveway, Lily watching with those big eyes that seemed too much for a 12-year-old. She wasn't just tired from chemo. There was something else in her expression, fear. She understood this was more than just a demolished building. At 12, cancer patients learned to read adult faces like survival guides. Emergency demolition notice. The header screamed at me in bold red letters, issued by the Willowbrook Homeowners Association, effective immediately due to structural safety concerns and community flood risk. The timestamp showed 2:47 p.m. I checked my phone. We'd been at the hospital from 1 February to 4:30. I had the parking validation receipt in my wallet. This notice claimed they'd made multiple failed attempts to contact the homeowner via certified mail and door-to-door visits before proceeding with emergency demolition. That was the first lie. I'd been home every day this week except for today. They'd specifically waited until they knew I'd be at Lily's treatment, unable to stop them. "Daddy, did they take pictures first?" Lily asked quietly, and I realized my daughter was thinking like a detective. She'd pulled out her phone and was already documenting the scene, taking photos of the demolition notice, the scattered timber, the excavator's license plate. Always get evidence right. That's what they do on TV, even weak from chemo. Lily was sharper than most adults. She understood we were under attack, and she was already fighting back in her way. Marcus, oh honey, I'm so sorry. Sarah Jenkins came rushing across the street, her silver hair flying behind her like she was 20 years younger. Sarah had lived here longer than anyone knew every family story, every property line, every secret this neighborhood had ever held. She was breathing hard, clutching her iPhone like it held the secrets of the universe. I took pictures, sweetheart. I saw that surveyor here last week with Karen and some fancy architect. They were measuring everything, talking about maximizing lakefront access for premium guests. I knew something was up. Behind Sarah, I could see other neighbors gathering on their porches, watching the drama unfold. Mrs. Peterson looked horrified. Mr. Kim was shaking his head in disgust, but I noticed the Hendersons just stared and walked back inside. The neighborhood was already choosing sides. She swiped through her phone, showing me photos of Karen Whitmore, our HOA president, and local control freak standing on my property with two men in expensive suits. One held a tablet, the other a measuring wheel. They were pointing at the barn, then toward the lake, then back at the barn. The photos were time-stamped from last Tuesday. Karen had been planning this demolition for at least a week, maybe longer. The emergency was as fake as her sympathy. Sarah, can you send me these photos? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. And do you remember exactly what they said about lakefront access? I walked to the rubble pile, Lily trailing behind me like a ghost. The excavator operator had been careful, or maybe just lucky, because some of the larger beams were still intact. I knelt and ran my hands over a piece of hand-hewn timber, feeling the adze marks my great-grandfather had left behind. They're carved into the wood with the careful precision of a man who built things to last forever, with the initials WSWS 1924, William Sullivan, the man who'd built this barn with his own hands during the Roaring Twenties. I closed my eyes and could almost see him, sleeves rolled up, working in the summer heat, because he believed in building something that would serve his family for generations. Daddy, why would they do this? Lily leaned against me, her bald head warm against my shoulder. The chemo had taken her beautiful red hair, but it couldn't touch her spirit. She was stronger than I was most days, which made this whole situation even more infuriating. Karen Whitmore had just torn down a piece of history while my daughter was fighting for her life. The woman had no soul. Lily picked up a piece of the carved wood, tracing the initials with her finger. Great-great-grandpa would be mad, wouldn't he? He built this for us, and they just threw it away. I don't know yet, sweetheart, but I'm going to find out. I stood up, brushing sawdust off my jeans, and felt something shift inside me. The grief I'd been carrying since Dad died 6 months ago was still there, but now it had company. Now it had a purpose. Karen wanted a fight. She'd picked the wrong Sullivan. We'd been protecting this land for 4 generations, and I wasn't about to let some power-hungry HOA president destroy what my family had built. I pulled out my phone and started taking my own photos of the demolished barn, the emergency notice, and the excavator still sitting on my property like a conquering army. If Karen wanted to play games with paperwork and legal notices, she was about to discover that 2 could play that game. Hank Rodriguez appeared from his house 3 doors down, his weathered face grim. He was a Marine veteran who'd served 3 tours before coming home to work construction, and he had that steady way of moving that made you feel safer just having him around. Brother, I saw what happened. This is some, he surveyed the wreckage with a professional eye. That was good timber, old growth. Someone paid serious money to have this torn down. You don't use equipment like that for emergency demo. You use it when you want to send a message. Hank knelt and examined some of the scattered beams. Look at this. They didn't just knock it down, they pulverized it. Made sure you couldn't rebuild with the original materials. This was personal. Sarah squeezed my arm. There's something else, Marcus. I heard Karen on the phone with someone yesterday. She was saying something about Phase 2 expansion and needing to acquire the Sullivan property within 90 days before the summer season. She didn't see me watering my flowers, but I heard every word. Phase 2 expansion. That explained everything. Karen didn't just want my barn gone, she wanted my entire property. The barn was just the opening move. I looked around at my neighbors, some supportive, some curious, some already disappearing back into their houses to avoid getting involved. This wasn't just about property lines or HOA regulations. This was about whether our community would stand up to bullies or let them destroy everything decent people had built. Lily tugged on my shirt. Daddy, what's that? She was pointing to something half buried in the rubble. I moved some broken boards and found a metal lockbox, dented but intact. It had been hidden in the barn's old tool cabinet and somehow survived the demolition. The lock was broken, and inside were yellowed photographs and documents that made my hands shake. Pictures of my great-grandfather standing beside the barn when it was newly built, shaking hands with men in suits. Construction photos of some kind of water system. And at the bottom, a folded paper that looked official with county seals and formal signatures. I looked at the demolition notice again, reading the fine print. Immediate compliance with mandatory safety upgrades required. Estimated cost, $75,000. Failure to comply within 30 days will result in additional enforcement actions. $75,000. That was more than I had made in the last 6 months between taking care of Lily and the medical bills. Karen knew exactly what she was doing. She was trying to force me out through financial pressure. But as I held those old documents from the lockbox, I realized she might have made a mistake. She'd been so focused on destroying the barn that she'd missed what was hidden inside it. Come on, Lil, let's go inside. I helped Lily up the front steps, her small hand cold in mine. She was getting weaker, and Dr. Hernandez had warned us that the next few months would be crucial. The last thing I needed was a war with the HOA, but apparently that's what I was getting. I settled Lily on the couch with her iPad and a blanket, then stood at the window staring at the ruins of my great-grandfather's barn. The demolition crew was packing up their equipment job done, probably eager to get home to their families. The excavator operator looked back at me once, and I saw something like regret in his face. He was just doing his job, following orders, but he'd destroyed something that could never be replaced. That barn had weathered the Great Depression, World War II, the moon landing 9/11, and everything in between. It had survived everything except Karen Whitmore's ambition. But as I spread those mysterious documents on my kitchen table, I began to suspect that my great-grandfather had been smarter than Karen gave him credit for. William Sullivan had built things to last, and maybe, just maybe, he'd built in some protections that a power-hungry HOA president hadn't counted on. The basement smelled like Dad's pipe tobacco and old secrets. I'd been avoiding it since the funeral, but Sarah's words about old-timers being smart kept echoing in my mind. Dad had been a methodical man, a keeper of records and family history. If there was something Karen didn't know about our property, it would be down here, among the boxes and filing cabinets that held 4 generations of Sullivan history. I started with the obvious stuff: property deeds, tax records, insurance policies, standard homeowner documentation that told the story of steady, responsible ownership. But then I found something interesting: a heavy metal box tucked behind a stack of my old college textbooks. The lock was rusty, but still functional. I remembered Dad showing me this box once when I was about Lily's age, saying it contained important family documents and that someday I'd need to know what was in it. The key was exactly where Dad said it would be, taped to the underside of his workbench. Inside the box, wrapped in oiled cloth like some pirate treasure, were documents that made my hands shake. A hand-drawn map of the entire water system dated 1924, showing every pipe, every valve, every connection between the lake and the surrounding properties. At the bottom, in my great-grandfather's careful handwriting, W. Sullivan, Chief, Water Engineer, Willowbrook County Water Trust. The second document was even better: a contract between William Sullivan and the county granting the Sullivan family perpetual water easement and emergency management authority over the entire lake system. It was signed by the county commissioner, the state water authority, and witnessed by 3 prominent local businessmen. The language was formal, old-fashioned, but the meaning was crystal clear. My family had legal authority over the water rights that fed Karen's precious resort. Holy cow, I whispered, then immediately felt guilty for swearing in Dad's sacred space. But this was huge. This changed everything. Karen thought she held all the cards because she controlled the HOA, but she'd been playing with an incomplete deck. My great-grandfather had been the guy who designed and built the dam system that created the lake in the first place. He wasn't just some farmer who happened to own land. He was the chief engineer who'd made Karen's resort possible. I found a third document that made me smile for the first time in days: a letter from the county commissioner dated 1925, thanking William Sullivan for his continued service to the community and confirming that water management responsibilities and authorities shall pass to his heirs in perpetuity. The letter specifically mentioned the sole emergency water control valve located on the Sullivan property, noting that it was essential for flood control and community safety. Lily appeared at the top of the basement stairs, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy, what are you doing down there?" She looked pale but alert, her chemo medication making her sleep schedule unpredictable. I climbed the stairs and showed her the documents, explaining what they meant in terms she could understand. Her eyes got wide when she realized what we'd found. So great-great-grandpa was like the boss of the whole lake. Lily's voice was stronger than it had been in weeks. "That's so cool. Does that mean we can tell Karen she can't have our land?" Out of the mouths of babes, Lily had cut right to the heart of the matter. "It means we have options, sweetheart. But first, I need to have a conversation with our dear HOA president." I helped Lily back to bed, then sat at my kitchen table with the documents spread out like battle plans. Karen had called an emergency HOA meeting for tomorrow night, probably to discuss ongoing community safety concerns and my failure to comply with mandatory safety upgrades. She was expecting me to show up defeated, maybe even ready to sell. The next evening, I walked into the community center with a manila folder under my arm and Lily beside me. I'd asked Hank to stay with Lily during the meeting, but she'd insisted on coming. "I want to see you tell Karen about great-great-grandpa," she'd said. How could I argue with that? Lily had been through hell with her treatment, and if watching her dad stand up to a bully gave her strength, then she was welcome to front-row seats. Karen sat at the front of the room, like some corporate queen, flanked by 2 other board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. About 30 neighbors filled the folding chairs, most of them looking uncomfortable. Karen had called this meeting, but I could tell from the faces around me that not everyone was buying her story about community safety. I stood up, Lily's hand squeezing mine for luck. Thank you for that creative presentation, Karen. I especially enjoyed the part where you called my great-grandfather's barn an unauthorized structure. That's interesting, because according to the documents, I found William Sullivan built that barn in 1924 as part of his responsibilities as chief water engineer for the Willowbrook County Water Trust. The room got quiet. Karen's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. Would you like to explain to everyone here why you demolished a structure that was not only legally built, but was part of the original water management system that created the lake your resort depends on? I opened my folder and pulled out photocopies of the documents. Karen's face went red. Those documents are probably fake. Old papers can be easily forged. Sarah, would you mind? Sarah Jenkins stood up, her phone in hand. I have photographs of Karen meeting with surveyors and architects on Marcus's property last week before any emergency demolition was necessary. I spent the next morning learning everything I could about Facebook Live. Lily helped me set up the camera angle, making sure the pile of barn rubble was visible in the background. She'd insisted on doing her makeup to cover the pallor from chemo, determined to look strong for what she called Daddy's movie. God, I loved that kid. Okay, people, let's talk about water rights and what happens when HOA presidents think they're above the law. I held up the original 1924 documents, making sure they were visible on camera. My name is Marcus Sullivan, and 3 days ago, the Willowbrook HOA demolished my great-grandfather's barn while I was at my daughter's cancer treatment. They called it an emergency demolition for community safety. The views account was climbing steadily. Hank had shared the link immediately, followed by Sarah, Rick, and about 20 other neighbors. The comments section was already filling up with fire emojis and outraged neighbors asking for more details. Social media was a beautiful thing when you had the truth on your side. Here's what they didn't tell you. I walked closer to the camera, the demolished barn, forming a perfect backdrop. William Sullivan, my great-grandfather, was the chief engineer who designed and built the entire water system that created this lake. He held perpetual water rights that passed down to his heirs. That's me. That's my daughter Lily, who's sitting right over there looking gorgeous despite what chemo's trying to do to her. Lily waved at the camera, her smile bright enough to power the entire neighborhood. The comments exploded with heart emojis and messages of support. People love an underdog story, but they love an underdog story with a sick kid and a demolished barn even more. Now, some of you might be wondering why the HOA president would risk legal action to tear down a historic barn. Well, let me read you something interesting. I pulled out Rick's flash drive and read directly from the printed emails. Karen Whitmore to Investor Group, Phase 2 expansion requires lakefront access. The Sullivan property is the key. Barn demolition is scheduled for Thursday during his daughter's treatment. Emergency clause gives us legal cover. The viewer count hit 10,000. The comments were coming so fast I couldn't read them all. But the general sentiment was clear. People were pissed. Karen had made a crucial mistake. She'd messed with a single dad and his sick daughter. In the court of public opinion, that was unforgivable. So, here's what I'm going to do, I said, walking toward the lake. Those water rights my great-grandfather secured, they include emergency management authority over the entire lake system, including the water flow to Willowbrook Resort. I stopped at the fence line where Karen's property began. You can see the resort over there, all those expensive boats and lakefront cabins. Beautiful place. Runs entirely on the water system my great-grandfather built. I turned back to the camera. I'm not going to do anything illegal. I'm not going to do anything destructive. But I am going to exercise my legal rights as water trustee, and Karen Whitmore is going to learn that actions have consequences. The video ended with me walking back toward the camera, Lily joining me, both of us standing in front of the demolished barn. The metaphor was perfect: destruction behind us, determination ahead of us. In 12 hours, the video had 15,000 views and 847 shares. The local Facebook groups were on fire with discussions about HOA overreach and water rights. Karen's response came within 24 hours, a certified letter from Hartwell and Associates threatening me with lawsuits for defamation, privacy violation, and inciting community unrest. The letter demanded that I remove the video and issue a public apology. It also included a formal complaint she'd filed with the county about unauthorized modification of water infrastructure, even though I hadn't touched anything yet. That afternoon, I decided to test the waters literally. I walked out to the dam valve system, Lily beside me, with her iPad to document everything. The valve was exactly where the 1924 map said it would be, hidden behind a small maintenance shed that most people probably assumed belonged to the county. The black SUV appeared in front of my house at 6:00 a.m. on a Tuesday, like some ominous harbinger of Karen's escalating desperation. Professional security, complete with tinted windows, and a guy who looked like he bench-pressed small cars for fun. By noon, there were cameras mounted on utility poles with clear sight lines to my front door, backyard, and the path to the lake. Lily peered through the living room curtains. "Daddy, why is that man just sitting there?" "Karen thinks she can intimidate us into submission," I explained, trying to keep my voice calm despite the fury building in my chest. "She's about to learn that Sullivan men don't intimidate easily." The cameras were just the beginning. By Thursday, every neighbor had received a professionally printed pamphlet titled "Marcus Sullivan, a Threat Assessment." 8 pages of carefully crafted propaganda designed to make me look like a dangerous radical. The cover featured a photo of me from the Facebook Live video, but edited to look sinister, with text overlay reading "Water Terrorist" and in bold red letters. Hank brought me a copy, his face grim. "Brother, this is some next-level psychological warfare. She's got fake testimonials from concerned citizens, quotes from structural engineers about flood risks, even a timeline of your escalating anti-community behavior. Professional job. Cost her serious money." The pamphlet was masterfully crafted lies wrapped in legitimate-sounding concerns. It mentioned Lily's illness, suggesting that my emotional instability due to family stress made me unpredictable and potentially dangerous. It included quotes from neighbors I'd never spoken to, expressing fears about their property values and family safety. Most damning, it featured a section about radicalization through social media that made my Facebook Live video sound like terrorist recruitment. The social isolation was immediate and brutal. Lily's friend Zoe didn't show up for their weekly art session. When Lily called, Zoe's mum answered with a cold, clipped voice. "I'm sorry, Lily, but Zoe can't play anymore. Your father's behavior has become concerning to many families in the neighborhood." Lily hung up and turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Peterson said I can't play with Zoe anymore because you're dangerous. Am I not allowed to have friends now?" That was the moment Karen made her biggest mistake. She'd gone after my daughter. Not her property, not her father's health, but her friendships, her 12-year-old's social life during the most difficult period of her young life. I felt something snap inside me, a cold rage that made the dam valve seem like a child's toy. coy. "Lily, listen to me," I said, kneeling to her level. "Some people are scared of the truth. They're scared of standing up for what's right. Mrs. Peterson isn't a bad person, she's just scared. But we're not going to let scared people decide what's right and wrong." That afternoon, I discovered Karen's legal masterpiece, a 47-page petition to the county court, requesting eminent domain seizure of my property. The document was a work of art, complete with professional photographs, fabricated engineering reports, and testimonials from concerned citizens about the public safety hazard my property represented. The petition claimed my property was essential for community flood control infrastructure improvements, and that my refusal to comply with safety regulations threatened the entire neighborhood. It included cost estimates for essential upgrades totaling $2,300,000 funded through emergency community assessments that would mysteriously exempt Karen's resort properties. But the most insidious part was the medical angle. The petition included a section about ensuring emergency access for vulnerable community members, specifically mentioning families with medical emergencies who require rapid evacuation routes. It was a beautiful manipulation, using Lily's cancer treatment as justification for stealing our land. Hank appeared at my truck window, followed by Sarah, Rick, and about 12 other neighbors I'd never expected to see together. Hank spoke for the group. "Marcus, we've been talking. This pamphlet thing is, and we all know it, Karen's gone too far." Sarah stepped forward with a folder full of documents. "I've been doing research. Karen's resort business has been reporting losses for tax purposes, but her social media shows constant bookings and luxury renovations. I think she's committing tax fraud." Rick added, "The hardware store sees everything. Karen's been buying surveillance equipment, printing supplies, and paying cash for everything. She's also been asking weird questions about water shutoff valves and emergency access codes." The call came at 3:17 a.m., jarring me from the first decent sleep I'd had in weeks. Dr. Hernandez's voice was professionally calm, but I could hear the underlying urgency. "Marcus, you need to bring Lily to the hospital immediately. Her blood work from yesterday shows some concerning changes." Lily was already awake, sitting up in bed, with that uncanny intuition that sick kids develop. "Is it time, Daddy?" she asked simply, and I knew she understood more about her condition than I had given her credit for. We'd talked about this possibility the moment when her body would tell us it was time for the bone marrow transplant. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of medical terminology and difficult decisions. Lily's white cell count had dropped dangerously low. Her body was losing the battle against leukemia, and the transplant could no longer be delayed. "The transplant will cost approximately $500,000, Dr. Hernandez said quietly. "With your insurance approval, your out-of-pocket should be around $50,000. Without approval," she didn't need to finish the sentence. "Without approval, Lily would die, and I would spend the rest of my life in bankruptcy trying to save her." I called the insurance company from Lily's hospital room while she slept. After an hour of transfers and hold music, I reached Linda Morrison, the supervisor handling Lily's case. Her voice was crisp, professional, and unmoved by my daughter's condition. "Mr. Sullivan, your daughter's case is under extended review due to questions about your family's financial stability and community support systems. Immunity references." The phrase hit me like a physical blow. Karen had somehow managed to insert herself into my daughter's medical care. That afternoon, Karen appeared at the hospital with flowers and a smile, dressed in her best concerned neighbor outfit. "Marcus, I heard about Lily's condition. I'm so sorry. I know we've had our differences, but at times like this, the community comes together." The audacity was breathtaking. "I want to help. I've spoken with Linda Morrison at Blue Cross. She's a dear friend from college, and she's very concerned about Lily's case." The insurance approval process can be complicated, especially when there are questions about family stability. I have a proposal. Karen continued, sitting uninvited in the visitor's chair. I'll personally guarantee Lily gets the best care available. Linda can expedite the approval process, and I'll make sure there are no delays. But we need to resolve our community issues first. $750,000 for your property fair market value, plus a premium for the inconvenience. The sale would demonstrate community integration and financial stability. Lily's insurance approval would be processed immediately, and all our hostilities would be forgotten. I looked at my daughter, then back at Karen. You're holding my daughter's medical care hostage to steal my land. I'm offering to solve your financial problems and ensure your daughter receives life-saving care. The choice is yours, Marcus, but the transplant window won't stay open forever. After Karen left, Lily grabbed my hand. Daddy, she's not helping me, is she? No, sweetheart. She's using you. I heard her talking to someone on the phone in the hallway. She said something about pressure points and inevitable conclusion. I think she's trying to hurt us. That evening, Hank and Jennifer Hayes arrived together. Marcus, we found the connection, Jennifer said, spreading documents across the small hospital table. Karen's resort company donated $50,000 to Blue Cross's Community Health Initiative. The same week, Lily's insurance claim was flagged for review. The donation was specifically earmarked for supporting deserving families in their coverage area. The evidence was overwhelming. Karen hadn't just crossed a line, she'd built an entire criminal enterprise around crossing that line. I looked at Lily, who was pretending to sleep, but listening to every word. Daddy, Lily whispered, what would great-great-grandpa do? I thought about William Sullivan, who'd spent his own money to build infrastructure that would benefit generations of neighbors. He'd protect his family first, I said, but he'd also protect the community. He'd make sure that bullies couldn't use their power to hurt people. Lily nodded, then surprised me by reaching for Jennifer's phone. Can I record a message? I want people to know what Karen is doing to my family. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lily's words kept echoing in my head. She's using my sickness to steal our home. Karen had crossed the final line. She'd turned my daughter's fight for life into a real estate transaction. I looked at Lily sleeping in her hospital bed tubes and monitors surrounding her like some high-tech fortress and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. The time for half measures was over. Karen wanted to play with water rights fine. She was about to learn why you never threaten a Sullivan's family. The walk to the dam valve felt like a pilgrimage through the darkness. My flashlight cut through the night, illuminating the path my great-grandfather had walked a century ago when he'd built this system to serve the community. The valve sat exactly where his hand-drawn map had indicated, hidden behind overgrown bushes that hadn't been trimmed in decades. The century-old mechanism looked like something from an industrial museum, a massive iron wheel connected to brass fittings that had turned green with age. This was the heart of the entire lake system, the single point of control that fed water to every property on the shore, including Karen's precious resort. I ran my hands over the cold metal, feeling the history in every groove and scratch. William Sullivan had designed this valve to be operated manually, believing that such important decisions should require human hands, human judgment, and human responsibility. The wheel was stiff with rust and corrosion, fighting against my grip like it was reluctant to be disturbed after so many years of quiet service. But persistence pays off, and Sullivan men know how to be persistent. I threw my full weight behind each turn, feeling decades of accumulated grime crack and give way. The metal groaned in protest, then began to move more freely as muscle memory awakened in the ancient mechanism. This wasn't just about water pressure anymore. This was about sending a message that some things, family dignity, a child's right to live, are not negotiable. I thought about Lily fighting for her life, while Karen played politics with her medical care. I thought about William Sullivan, who'd built this dam to serve his community, and Karen Whitmore, who was trying to steal it to serve only herself. Each turn of the wheel felt like justice, like the universe finally balancing scales that had been tilted too long in favor of bullies and corruption. The valve turned completely closed with a final satisfying click that echoed through the night air like a judge's gavel. The silence that followed was profound. No more water was flowing through the ancient pipes, no more feeding the system that sustained Karen's empire. I stood there in the darkness, breathing hard from the effort, and felt the weight of a century's worth of family responsibility settling on my shoulders. William Sullivan had built this valve system to protect the community. Tonight, I was using it for the same purpose, to protect my family and send a message that some people's greed had consequences. By morning, Karen's empire looked like a disaster zone, painted in shades of brown and failure. The infinity pool had dropped 4 feet overnight, revealing algae-stained concrete that looked like the bottom of a prehistoric swamp. The meticulously maintained lawns were already browning in the morning sun, automatic sprinklers clicking uselessly against empty pipes that sounded like mechanical death rattles. The golf course looked like a moonscape water hazards reduced to cracked mud flats, where expensive koi flopped desperately in puddles that shrank by the hour. Guests were checking out in droves, dragging suitcases across what had been a manicured paradise just 12 hours earlier. Karen's call came at 6:15 a.m., her voice shrill with panic and rage cutting through the peaceful morning air. "You psychopath, you're destroying people's vacations. I'll have you arrested for sabotage." "Or sure, you tried to destroy my daughter's life," I replied, calmly watching the sunrise paint the empty lake bed in shades of gold and justice. Now you know what it feels like when someone controls something you need to survive. The resort that had been her weapon against my family was now a muddy parking lot, exactly as I'd promised in that moment of rage weeks ago. "Turn the water back on immediately or You'll what, Karen? Call your friend Linda at the insurance company. Your reign of terror is over." I hung up and drove back to the hospital, feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not just hope that Lily would survive her cancer, but hope that our community could survive people like Karen Whitmore. Tomorrow, I would face the county commissioners with everything I had. Karen had made the mistake of thinking that grief and desperation would make me weak. She was about to learn that sometimes when you have nothing left to lose, you discover exactly how strong you are. The county commissioner's meeting room was packed beyond capacity. Word had spread through social media about Lily's video message, and the story of an HOA president holding a child's medical care hostage had ignited something primal in the community. Jennifer's live stream had over 8,000 viewers before the meeting even started. Lily sat beside me in her wheelchair, wearing her favorite purple dress and a baseball cap that read Team Sullivan, a gift from Hank's Marine buddies who'd driven 3 hours to show support. She'd insisted on attending despite her weakness, saying, "Great-great-great-grandpa would want me to be here." Karen arrived with an entourage that looked like a corporate board meeting. 3 lawyers, 2 men in expensive suits who were probably investors, and a woman with a briefcase who kept checking her phone. Karen herself was dressed in a conservative business suit, playing the role of concerned community leader. Commissioner Bradley called the meeting to order. We are here to address concerns about water rights management and HOA governance in the Willowbrook area. Mr. Sullivan, you requested this forum. Please proceed. I stood up, my folder of evidence in hand. Commissioners, my name is Marcus Sullivan. 5 weeks ago, the Willowbrook HOA demolished my great-grandfather's barn while I was at my daughter's cancer treatment. They called it an emergency demolition for community safety. What I'm about to show you proves that this demolition was planned months in advance as part of a scheme to force my family off our land. I started with a timeline, Karen's secret property surveys, the fake emergency demolition notice, the impossible financial demands. I showed them the original 1924 water rights documents, the county contract, establishing my family's perpetual easement, and the evidence of Karen's planned Phase 2 expansion. I moved to the medical angle. Commissioners, my daughter Lily requires a bone marrow transplant. Our insurance company has delayed approval for this life-saving procedure. I've discovered that Karen Whitmore has been communicating with insurance executives about our family's community stability and support systems. The room erupted in angry murmurs. Someone shouted, "That's sick!" Another voice called out, "Using a kid's cancer." I played Lily's recorded message, her 12-year-old voice filling the room with quiet dignity. "My name is Lily Sullivan. I have leukemia, and I need a bone marrow transplant to live. Mrs. Whitmore is making my daddy choose between saving me and saving our family's land. She's using my sickness to steal our home. That's not fair, and it's not right." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see tears in the eyes of several commissioners and audience members. Karen's face had gone pale, her carefully constructed image crumbling in real time. Furthermore, I continued, I've discovered that Karen Whitmore has been systematically violating federal water management regulations. Her resort has been drawing water beyond permitted limits, and she's made unauthorized modifications to the intake system that feeds her property. I presented EPA inspection reports that Jennifer had obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests. These violations have been ongoing for 3 years, resulting in environmental damage and potential federal criminal charges. Commissioner Martinez spoke up. "Miss Whitmore, would you like to respond to these allegations?" Karen stood up, her composure finally cracking. "Commissioners, Mr. Sullivan is emotionally unstable due to his family situation. He's been threatening our community's water supply, making dangerous modifications to essential infrastructure. I've been trying to protect our neighborhood from his increasingly erratic behavior." Erratic behavior. I pulled out my phone. "Commissioners, I'd like to play some audio recordings. These are legal under our state's single-party consent law." The first recording was Karen's voice, crystal clear. "Marcus needs to understand that community cooperation affects everything. Property values, insurance, approvals, even medical care priorities. Families who work with the HOA receive better support during emergencies." The second recording was even more damning. "Linda, it's Karen about the Sullivan insurance claim. The family's community integration is questionable. They've been resistant to neighborhood improvement initiatives, and there are concerns about their stability. An extended review might help them understand the importance of community cooperation." The room exploded. Commissioners were shouting over each other. Audience members were on their feet, and Karen's lawyers were frantically whispering in her ear. But Karen herself was having what could only be described as a complete breakdown. "I was protecting this community," she screamed, her voice echoing off the walls. "After I lost my son, this place became everything to me. I won't let anyone destroy what I've built." And then she said the words that sealed her fate. "If Marcus Sullivan thinks he can use his sick daughter to manipulate this community, he's wrong. I've worked too hard to let one emotional father destroy everything I've built." The room went completely silent. Even her lawyers were staring at her in horror. Lily reached for my hand and squeezed it tightly. Commissioner Bradley's voice was cold as ice. "Miss Whitmore, did you just admit to using a child's medical condition as leverage in a property dispute?" Karen realized what she'd said, but it was too late. The damage was done, recorded live on Jennifer's stream for 12,000 viewers to witness. The dominoes started falling. Within 48 hours of the commissioner's meeting, the FBI opened a federal investigation into Karen's water rights violations and public corruption. The state attorney general's office launched a tax fraud investigation. The county revoked her HOA leadership position and placed the entire board under supervised reorganization. But the sweetest victory came from an unexpected source. Linda Morrison, the insurance supervisor who'd been delaying Lily's treatment, called me personally to announce that Lily's bone marrow transplant had been expedited to priority status and would be fully covered. Blue Cross had decided that its community health initiative needed to avoid any association with medical extortion. Lily's surgery was scheduled for the following Monday. Dr. Hernandez explained that I would be the donor. We were a perfect match, which she called a gift from genetics and love. Lily just grinned and said, "Great-great-great-grandpa is still taking care of us, isn't he?" Karen's resort empire began crumbling immediately. The EPA filed federal charges for environmental violations, resulting in massive fines that forced her to liquidate assets. The tax fraud investigation revealed that she'd been hiding income for 3 years, leading to criminal charges and seizure of her properties. But the final blow came from her own investors. The viral video of her breakdown had damaged her reputation beyond repair. The investors pulled out, demanding immediate repayment of their loans. Within 2 weeks, Karen was forced to sell everything she owned to cover her legal fees and financial obligations. She lost everything: her properties, her business, her reputation, her freedom. The woman who'd tried to steal my family's legacy ended up with nothing but a prison cell and the knowledge that her greed had destroyed her. Lily's surgery was a complete success. The bone marrow transplant went perfectly, and within 6 weeks, her blood counts were normal. Her hair started growing back, curly and red like her mother's had been. She insisted on celebrating by painting watercolors of the lake, saying she wanted to remember why great-great-grandpa built this for everyone. The county commissioners voted unanimously to accept the water rights transfer outlined in William Sullivan's will. The lake system became a public trust managed by an elected board of community residents. I was elected as the first water trustee, a position I accepted with the understanding that I was continuing my great-grandfather's work. Karen pleaded guilty to federal corruption charges and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. The day Lily came home from the hospital, the entire neighborhood gathered in our backyard. Hank had organized a welcome home barbecue that turned into an impromptu celebration of community spirit. Kids were playing in the lake, families were sharing food, and everyone was talking about plans for the new community water board. 6 months later, we held the grand opening of the William Sullivan Community Center, built on the exact site where Karen had demolished the original barn. The building combined historical displays about the lake's creation with modern facilities for community meetings, children's programs, and emergency services. Lily had designed a memorial garden where people could sit and appreciate the lake. The centerpiece was a bronze plaque with words she'd written, "Water belongs to everyone. Communities are built by people who care more about tomorrow than today." William Sullivan, 1924 to 1954, and all who continue his work. Lily appeared beside me, healthy and strong, carrying a new watercolor. This one showed the lake at sunrise, with the community center in the background, and families gathered on the shore. At the bottom, she'd written, "Some things are worth fighting for." "Ready for the next adventure, Daddy?" she asked, grinning. I looked at the lake, the community center, the neighbors who'd become family, and my daughter, who taught me that courage comes in all sizes. William Sullivan had built a dam to serve his community. Karen Whitmore had tried to steal it for profit. But in the end, justice had prevailed, and the water kept flowing for everyone. Yeah, Lil, I'm ready. This story teaches us that true power lies not in manipulation or greed, but in integrity, perseverance, and community. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, standing up for what's right and upholding long-held principles can dismantle the most ruthless of schemes. It highlights the importance of collective action and the unwavering spirit of those who protect their loved ones and their legacy. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in standing up to bullies and protecting what matters most, then smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Share this with anyone who's ever faced down a bully, anyone who's fought for their family, anyone who believes that justice should flow as freely as water. Because there are more stories like this one, stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when pushed too far. Until next time, keep fighting the good fight.